But right off the top, we're going to focus on a member of this year's draft class as the Giants selected edge rusher Azeez Ojulari in the second round. And we are now joined by a man who helped raise his stock even before he became a Georgia Bulldog. His high school coach, the head football coach at Marietta High School in Georgia, none other than Richard Morgan. Coach, you got Lance Medow and Jeff Feagles here on Giants.com, Big Blue Kickoff Live. Greatly appreciate the time today. Hope you and yours are safe and healthy. How's everything on your end?
Everything's great. Appreciate you having me on. Love to talk about Azeez. He's a tremendous human being.
Absolutely, and the Giants certainly happy to have him in the fold, and we appreciate you taking the time to provide some insight on his development and so forth. And I want to start, Coach, with really your first impressions of Ojulari, because from what I understand, you took over as the head coach following his sophomore year. So when you came in, how much did you know about Ojulari, and what were your first impressions of him?
Really didn't know anything about him. I had film of the previous year's team, so I watched kids and kind of graded them, the ones that were coming back, but I really didn't know much about him. Impressions, he made an immediate impression on me, and the story I always tell everyone is I was here for about a month, and then I pulled him aside, and we had a conversation, and I just said, look, you're going to be the face of this program. You have everything I want. I want people to follow what you do, the work ethic, the way he loves the game, the way he just pushed himself in the weight room, his grades, how he is in the classroom. He was just exactly the role model that I wanted the program to start moving towards. They had been struggling for a few years, and we needed to get this thing right, and I just felt like he was going to be the face of the program. So that was kind of what I thrust on him when he was 16, and he just took it and ran with it, and now here he is a New York Giant.
Yeah, well, we're certainly happy to have him, Richard, and I know that you've been around him long enough to know that he's a special human being, and I think that the Giants fans are going to really enjoy getting to know Azeez for a long time. Talk to me a little bit about, and I think that watching him go through his workouts, and we follow these guys and we really vet them pretty much through the draft process, and Azeez was a guy that a lot of people had him as a first rounder, and he dropped to the second most likely because of his knee. But talk to me a little bit about how he stands out, his work ethic, his family life. I think all those things come into focus when we talk about a first or second rounder in the NFL and how important it is the background that he came from.
Well, first of all, his family is absolutely tremendous. His mom and dad are great people. They've raised 4 great children. Azeez has 2 sisters and a brother. And the whole family is just top-notch there, just, the best family you could meet. He is an outstanding representative of character and integrity. And I think that got instilled in him at an early age from his mom and dad. But such great character and integrity, such great mental toughness. He's passionate about everything he does. So, all of those characteristics, that's why I just, in my heart, I know he's going to be a great pro, because he has the mental toughness and he has the makeup inside of him to get through the tough times in the NFL, to be able to handle the length of a season and the grueling schedule. I just think that he's got all the intangibles where he's going to be successful throughout a long career.
Coach, speaking of his work ethic and intensity, and correct me if I'm wrong, I was reading, I believe at the beginning of every season, don't you still play a play that he made in his senior year for the entire team to sort of set the tone, a hustle play in which he chased down a running back?
I do. His senior year, we were playing the team that actually won the state championship, and a Division I running back broke free, and Azeez was 15 yards behind on the last play of the half, and Azeez caught up, tackled him at the 5-yard line. It was the game-saving play because nobody scored in the second half, and we ended up winning the game 14-12, I think. And that was just a perfect example because, as a defensive end who's rushing the passer, and then all of a sudden they run a draw play and the ball gets handed off, most people don't have any business making that play 15 yards behind, but he sprinted down the middle of the field, caught the kid, and that's just the example that we say this is what we want out of our football players, no matter what the score is, no matter what point in the game it is. This is the effort we want. So we show that to the kids every year to say, this is what you want to, set your standards to.
Azeez, obviously he's a tremendous athlete. Play a little basketball. I think all these guys play basketball. They love the game.
Yeah.
What are some of the exciting things that you see him as his progression going from high school and certainly into college and now at the pro level that a defensive coordinator gets his, he gets a little excited about? Is it, he can put his hand in the dirt, he can play off ball? What is it that excites you about him, and where do you think you see him trending towards the position that he'll play at the pros?
Well, what I'm most excited about is that I know how well he plays the run and the pass. So what I'm excited about is him being an every down player. I think as a defensive coordinator with a 53-man roster, you need to have guys that can do a lot of things. And he's a guy that doesn't have to be subbed out. He's a guy that's going to be able to play the run, play the pass, drop in coverage, rush the quarterback. So I just think he brings that wide variety of skills where he can be on the field and you can use him in so many different ways, blitzing, bringing him up the middle, taking him off the edge, dropping him in coverage, and you don't have to worry about taking him out on a certain down or distance. And I think that really helps defensive coordinators when they can rely on guys that can do all those things.
We're talking with Richard Morgan, head football coach at Marietta High School in Georgia. He coached Azeez Ojulari, the Giants' second-round pick, for his final 2 years in high school. In terms of how the Giants may utilize him and what he did at Georgia, when you look at Giants defensive coordinator, Coach Patrick Graham, he's the type of guy that's very versatile in terms of his fronts. We've seen 4-man fronts, 3-man fronts. As far as Ojulari's upside, Coach, how much do you think he has the capability of playing up front as a defensive end in addition to maybe an outside linebacker standing up?
Well, yeah, like I just said, I mean, at Georgia, I think, he did a lot of the same things. He's been doing it since he's been doing it since he was 16 years old. But, I mean, he plays the run just as well. So his hand strength and his arm length are uncanny, and he can get his hands on offensive linemen and get rid of them quickly and get into the backfield and make plays in the run game. But he also has that speed and that club move off the edge that just makes him a very tough matchup. And I know that NFL offensive line coaches are going to try to take away a speed rush, so he's going to have a nice spin move inside. He's going to be able to develop more stuff to counteract that as he gets older. But I just think he's a guy that's going to be able to play the run and the pass. He can play down. He can play over a tight end. I've seen him line up on tackles and play the C gap. I just think he has a lot of abilities that maybe people don't know about yet, but I think they'll see it as they continue to watch him grow and develop. They're going to find out about all of his skill sets.
Coach Morgan, you mentioned about offensive linemen, and one offensive lineman that the Giants have is, of course, Andrew Thomas, their number 1 draft pick last season. I know that they were roommates in college. I know that they've gotten to know each other pretty well these last few years. Talk to us a little bit about their relationship and how you think that will foster going forward for Azeez. And it's always nice to have somebody when you come into some place that you don't know.
Yeah, I think the familiarity he has, with him is going to help him just learning the process of what it takes to be a pro and to go through the process and go through that rookie year. So I think the ability to lean on somebody that you're great friends with, that you've lived with, I think that's a huge benefit. But they've been very close ever since Azeez went to Georgia. Roommates, they went against each other every day in practice, but they pushed each other. So I think that's going to continue to grow and develop. And I think that type of relationship is really going to help Azeez's first year as he acclimates himself to the NFL.
Coach, from what I understand, speaking of Andrew Thomas, you were also, I believe, at the house when Ojulari got the news that he was selected by the Giants. What was it like for him to be surrounded by friends and family, including yourself? And what was that atmosphere like, considering I'm sure he probably anticipated he was going to get a phone call maybe on night 1, and he had to wait a little bit longer than anticipated?
Well, actually, unfortunately, I was there on night 1. Where it was a 4-hour night and we all left very disappointed. Yeah. So I felt so terrible for him because I knew he deserved to have his name called. I felt so terrible for him. But in typical Azeez fashion, he just stands up and says, "Thank everybody for coming. We're going to be just fine. Have a great night." And he was the typical, perfect young man that he is. And everybody left. And the next night, he had a smaller gathering. I wasn't able to go the next night. But then as soon as he got the call, me and him got on the phone, and we talked for about 20 minutes afterwards, after he got done doing a bunch of interviews with probably media and New York Giant representatives. And we just had a great conversation. Just one of those special coach-player bonding times, just almost like the reward of everything you've done has finally come. And, it was a nice moment to have.
Well, it certainly is. I mean, I played in the NFL for a long, long time. I never got drafted, but it was exciting. I know just when I was able to get a phone call from a team that wanted me to come to camp, so I can imagine being drafted like he was. But I feel like Azeez is the type of person, and correct me if I'm wrong, that he'll kind of use this as a little bit of a motivational chip, just saying, hey, I can't believe that I didn't get chosen in the first round, and take that with him. We're excited about having him, that's for sure. And I just think that he's got a lot of good things to come, because he's, in my opinion, just from talking to you and looking and seeing him, he's a guy that's going to surprise a lot of people.
Yeah, and I tell you what, they couldn't get a better guy for the locker room. Just as far as being a great teammate, he loves his teammates, he loves the game. So I just think that the team's going to fall in love with him. I think the whole New York area is just going to fall in love with him, because I think one thing about the fans in New York, they really appreciate guys that just go out and give 100% every single time they're on the field, and that's what he is. So he'll become a fan favorite because he has that work ethic that everybody appreciates.
Coach, related to the topic of leadership, I think when a lot of people look at him and they look maybe at his track record, he's not necessarily the most boisterous guy, right? He doesn't necessarily jump in front of the microphone and act as an extreme vocal presence, but sometimes that's misinterpreted as not having leadership. I'm curious, what have you seen in terms of his development as a leader, and why maybe a quiet player like him shouldn't be overlooked simply because he's not in your face when it comes to leadership?
Well, I think the thing with Azeez, he's always been a very humble and, quiet, young man. Ever since I met him, he's just very, just does his job and doesn't like to be boisterous and things like that. But I think as I've watched him over the years, he became a captain at Georgia his freshman year. That doesn't happen. He became a team leader, a team spokesman. When they would go to bowl games or when they would have media days, it was Azeez that was out front speaking about the team, because I think he's the ultimate representative of what a team is supposed to be. And I think when you look at leadership, your leaders have to be team guys first. They can't be individual guys. They got to be team guys that are bought in, and people will follow those types of people. And I just think with Azeez, he's continued to grow and develop that ability to get out in front and be a spokesman and be that guy that leads by vocal as also, by the way, he does on the field. So that continues to grow and develop. I've seen that in him. But the way he plays, like you see the intensity and the ferocity that he plays with on the field, it gets his teammates excited. It gets the crowd excited, and I think that's a form of leadership also.
Well, it's something that not only the Giants, but a lot of other teams obviously look for is some leadership, and there's a lot of guys that lead on the field that not necessarily lead off the field and with their mouths. And Eli Manning was one that comes to mind. He basically he was a leader so much on the field, not a big voice, in their locker room, but everybody respected him, and I'm sure that he's going to have a good place here in New York, because I know coming from the NFL, it's important to build a team within, and I think the character that you need and representative in the locker room, that's a big for culture, and to have a guy like Azeez is going to be really good for that locker room.
I agree 100%, and I just think that people in New York see Azeez around, they see him out and about, they see him doing things. I just think that, I think fans will be like, see, that's what a New York Giant is right there. I mean, and that right there will do wonders, for any team, is when you see a guy saying that's what we want. That's what the example is right there, and that's the type of kid he's always been since I've met him. So I think that's really going to be just one more feather in his cap that he just can say, this is another thing for the guy.
I'll tell you this: if he gets after the quarterback like we think he's gonna be very, very popular here in New York.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that, considering the track record of guys that have played for the Giants organization. And, Coach, that really brings me to the value of what the Giants are getting in Ojulari, because if you look at most of the draft projections leading up to things, most people would say Ojulari was the best pass rusher in this year's group. So for the Giants to grab a guy like that at the 50th overall pick is quite an accomplishment, yet there were a lot of question marks, as Jeff alluded to, surrounding his knee. Now, you were there when he tore his right ACL right at the tail end of his senior year. I'm curious, A, how you looked at his rehab process and really how he handled all of that leading into Georgia, in which he redshirted as a freshman.
Well, I can tell you this, his knee is 100%, fine. It's like nothing ever happened. He started 24 games in the SEC, which is the toughest conference in America, and never missed a game. There's nothing wrong with his knee. So where that rumor started from, I don't know. But I can tell you this, the moment it happened, as soon as he had the ability, he was in our training room 5 days a week, rehabbing, attacking it like he would a practice or a game. And he was ready to go when he left for Georgia. Now, they redshirted him at the beginning of the year just to get a little more time, but then he ended up playing in the bowl game against Texas, and ended up playing a great game then. So he even came back and played at a very high level that freshman year. So his knee is fine. But I guess the key is in the NFL, you're always going to be dealing with injuries, and I think the important thing is how guys handle those injuries. And with Azeez, I saw him attack an ACL injury and attack it at the rehab process and make himself as strong as he possibly could be. So I know that he'll always continue that mindset throughout his NFL career. So minor injuries aren't going to set him back. He's going to work hard to be on the field every week. And that's important because that's part of being in the NFL too.
You know, speaking of his development and his work ethic, as you just alluded to, I believe when you took over, clearly, as we were talking earlier, he wasn't necessarily a household name, and then all of a sudden he goes from a bit of an unknown coach to, I was reading, he received about 30 offers from various programs, right, by the time that all of a sudden he's considering college. What do you attribute, aside from work ethic, in terms of his performance in his play that really caught the eye of these big-time programs and gave him various offers to think about?
Well, I just think that, once he got more film out there his junior year, and then he hit a couple of the camp circuits. I just think people started seeing, wow, who's this kid? And then they started watching more film of him, and you could just see the development from sophomore year to junior year, and you could just watch it happen. And I think people just started envisioning what Azeez could become. Then he got invited to the Nike opening, and he was out there with all the best players in the country, and he did really well out there. And then when I was in Virginia, I had Josh Sweat, who Josh now plays for the Philadelphia Eagles. And I told a lot of coaches, because when they called me and asked me about him, they're like, "All right, tell us, does he compare to Josh at all?" And I'm like, "Yes, he's just like Josh. He can't miss. Take him. You need to take him." So people started, okay, if he's going to compare him to Josh, then I think there's probably we got a shot here. So that's kind of how the process kind of started a little bit, and then just kind of, he became one of the best players in the country.
Well, it's funny because the football world, it's not what you know, it's basically who you know. There are two giant coaches on this staff that basically recruited him. Jeremy Pruitt from the University of Tennessee, and Coach Scherer, who was his coach.
Yeah.
And so I think that those are, he hit a home run. I mean, he's got his roommate that he's with the team. He's got a couple coaches that are here. He's got, I don't know how much he knows Lorenzo Carter, but the fact is that he's going to feel right at home when he walks in here for the first time. So that's exciting for him.
That's what I told him. I said, look, forget about the whole first round thing. You're going to a situation, you're going to a great organization that believes in defense, and you've got former coaches and former players. I mean, you're going to feel right at home. So, I mean, everything works for a reason, right? And I think it's just a perfect fit for Azeez and for New York Giants. It's a perfect fit. I couldn't be happier for him.
We're talking to Richard Morgan, head football coach at Marietta High School in Georgia. He coached Azeez Ojulari in his final 2 years in high school. Jeff just brought up those two coaches on the Giants staff. Coach, I'm curious because I'm sure you spoke to a lot of coaches when they were recruiting Ojulari. How beneficial do you think that helped the Giants gain background information on Ojulari through the draft process? The fact that you had two guys that really went in depth on him, even when he was making the jump from high school to college as opposed to college to the pros.
Well, with the NFL, I mean, I get questionnaires or phone calls all the time about, players, and they want to know their background story. They want to know how they've been as a kid and how their work ethic is. So that's important because NFL teams are investing an awful lot of money in people, and they got to make sure that they're getting great guys in their locker room that are going to be committed to the team. So I think the fact that you can go to somebody on your staff who knows him and recruited him and has been in his house and knows his parents, I think that's just helpful. Then you got two coaches that can do it, and then you can go to one of your players and say, hey, how was he as a teammate when you played with him at Georgia? So that I think just increases his stock, and I think it makes the Giants really, really comfortable with their selection because they know, look, we checked all the boxes on this young man, and everybody just raves about him. And I've never heard anyone say a bad word about Azeez in my, in the entire time I've known him. I've never heard a bad word about him from anyone. Everyone loves him. He's got that magnetic personality. So, yeah, I think familiarity with who you're recruiting and or who you're drafting is important. And I think the Giants know that they got the right one.
Well, especially in a year, to your point, where you had an unconventional offseason and it helped to have background information on players, especially if you couldn't see them in person because of the coronavirus. Coach, last one for me in terms of, it's quite funny how you mentioned you had groomed Josh Sweat, who's in the division in the NFC East. Now all of a sudden Ojulari's coming aboard. What's it going to be like for you watching 2 Giants-Eagles games this season from a personal standpoint?
It'll be great. You can just sit there as a fan and just be happy. Just be happy for the 2 young men. I mean, that's all. I'm happy for them. I'm happy for their families. They're both great people, and they do well by their organizations, and they're great people. So it's just going to be fun. It'll be a proud moment for myself personally, but I'm not about myself. I'm about what those kids are doing with their lives and how they're changing their families' lives. That's what matters to me, and I just couldn't be any happier for them.
Well, Coach Morgan, we appreciate you coming on the show with us today, and we know how important a high school football coach is to mentoring those young men. And I think you do an outstanding job, and keep up the good work. And thank you for your work with Azeez. We're looking forward to seeing him play football for the New York Giants, and we're very excited about it. I'm sure you are too.
I am, and thank you very much for your time. And maybe I'll see you guys when I come up to a game one time. But yeah, I think it's going to be a great fit.
Well, It's a shame that the Giants are not visiting the Atlanta Falcons, Coach. The Falcons are actually coming to the Giants, so maybe we could work something out under the circumstances.
That would be nice.
Absolutely. He is Richard Morgan, the head football coach at Marietta High School in Georgia, helped groom Azeez Ojulari there, coached him for his final 2 years in his high school career. Coach, once again, pleasure having you on the program. Thanks so much. Best of luck with your upcoming season, and we look forward to talking to you down the road.
All right, thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you.